somebody screams on the other side, "Where is Dennis?" So I go under the water and I grab something, and I feel this hand grabbing my arm. He didn't shoot for 3 days. He almost died.
Few films from the late 90s carry the same mix of mystery and ambition as The 13th Warrior. Known for its striking blend of Viking legend and raw survival, it's a movie that feels both ancient and ahead of its time. Yet beneath the sword fights and shadows lies something audiences never fully grasped. Decades later, Antonio Banderas has finally spoken out, sharing thoughts that pull back the curtain on what really happened behind the scenes. His words hint at a truth long hidden, one that invites fans to look closer than ever before. The core mystery explained. One of the most puzzling aspects of The 13th Warrior has always been a plot element that left many viewers scratching their heads. Antonio Banderas, who played the protagonist Ahmad ibn Fadlan, has revealed a hidden layer to the story that explains this confusion. He points out that a key cultural misunderstanding embedded in the script was deliberately nuanced, making it easy for audiences to miss. Rather than a simple action adventure, the film weaves complex historical and linguistic threads that challenge straightforward interpretation. The mysterious detail involves the identity of the so-called 13th Warrior and the true nature of Ahmad's role within the Viking group. While the title implies a purely physical or combat-focused contribution, Banderas clarifies that Ahmad's importance extends beyond fighting to cultural mediation and bridging divides. This subtlety was underappreciated at the time, giving rise to the mainstream view that he was just the outsider warrior, rather than an essential cultural figure. Adding another layer, Banderas explains that the film's blending of mythological elements with historical facts was intentional but led to mixed signals for viewers who expected a more traditional Viking tale. The filmmakers wanted to honor Michael Crichton's original book, which itself was inspired by a real historical figure, a 10th-century Andalusian traveler encountering Norse culture. Yet, the execution left several key plot mechanics ambiguous. In particular, Banderas highlights the film's treatment of language barriers as more than a plot device. It serves as a symbol of cross-cultural exchange. Ahmad's struggle to communicate and be accepted is not just personal, but represents the broader historical encounters between Islamic and Viking civilizations. Many fans did not catch this deeper resonance, equating his character to a typical action hero instead of a nuanced diplomat. This layered characterization, hinted at by Banderas, ultimately reframes the film's central conflict. The threat the warriors face is both external, a mysterious enemy, and internal, the challenge of understanding and cooperation amid cultural differences. The 13th Warrior is thus more than a role. It is a metaphor for bridging worlds. Despite this, many viewers focused predominantly on the Viking action, overlooking the subtle narrative. Banderas further elaborates on the impact of editing and reshooting on the understanding of this central mystery. It was the decision to cut some parts that could have made Ahmad's cultural role clearer that the film's ending came to appear confused. This move, partly due to the studio's insistence, further compounded the misconceptions of the bystanders and critics alike. The title character's part feeling unclear was, indeed, the question many were left with. The actor confesses that his experience of watching the film years later, with this context in mind, has helped him to appreciate the story differently and has inspired him to publicly clarify the importance of his character's arc. He seems to imply that the 13th Warrior is not so much a direct survival story, but rather a complex narrative about identity and empathy. This unearthing of the theme prompts a reevaluation of the movie's topics that go beyond its outward actions. Hearing this from Banderas, fans get a new perspective to consider the movie, one that not only reveals but also invites them to see the appreciation for the cultural dynamics and the subtle choices of storytelling that are unspoken. The enigma that was previously termed a confusing plot hole turns out to be a carefully placed and intentional nuance that is waiting to be discovered. It questions the belief that the audience is always aware of a film's true message. This concealed fact opens up the way for a more thorough exploration of the story's beginnings, which will then show how rich and layered the 13th Warrior is. Exploring the film's foundation in real history and literature shows why these cultural intersections matter so much in the story. Origins of the 13th Warrior. The 13th Warrior is based on Michael Crichton's 1976 novel Eaters of the Dead, which itself retells a 10th-century manuscript called The Journey of Ahmad ibn Fadlan. This historical account details Ahmad's travels as an emissary from the Abbasid Caliphate to a Viking tribe along the Volga River. The real Ibn Fadlan's observations provide a rare outsider's view of Viking culture, which Crichton dramatized with a fictionalized battle against mysterious creatures. Crichton blended actual historical events and Norse mythology to create a unique story that simultaneously explored cultural clashes and the heroism of survival. His novel challenged readers to suspend genre expectations by mixing travelogue, history, and horror. When Hollywood adapted it into The 13th Warrior, some of this complexity struggled to fully translate onto screen. Historically, Ibn Fadlan's mission was diplomatic, aiming to forge alliances and report on the lands of the Vikings known as the Rus. His writings describe detailed rituals, funeral customs, and the social fabric of these northern tribes, revealing a civilization vastly different from his own Islamic world. That tension between observer and observed forms the backbone of the narrative's cultural exploration. The film's screenplay tried to honor this dynamic by making Ahmad not just a warrior fighter, but also a cultural bridge. However, the pressures of making an action movie led to an emphasis on battle sequences and fantasy elements, occasionally obscuring the original historical substance. This tension mirrors the dual nature of the novel and the source manuscript. The Vikings, known for their fierce raids and warrior ethos, are portrayed with some historical accuracy, but also through the lens of Hollywood adventure storytelling. Their customs, the threat of the monstrous Wendell, a stand-in for historical tribes, and the harsh northern environment all contribute to a mythic atmosphere. This setting underscores the challenges of cross-cultural understanding. Crichton's concept was to depict the progress of a man who knows nothing about Norse culture, to a point where he not only respects them, but also fights alongside them, as he represents through adaptability, rather than mere conquest. This motif has its sources in genuine history, but it was also meant to circumvent the usual outsider saves the day stereotypes. The movie, on the other hand, found it difficult to convey this subtlety comprehensibly to the general public. Amazingly, the original manuscript and the novel both point out the significance of language and storytelling as means of survival and alliance building, factors that resonate with Antonio Banderas's assertion of cultural mediation. These elements constitute the hidden layers that many in the audience overlooked when assuming a straightforward action film was being presented. The adaptation was difficult at the same time because of the decision to reach out to very wide audiences, and as a consequence, major parts of Crichton's layered narrative were altered. Thus, it was very hard to keep the book's drama, history, and myth in the right proportions. Nevertheless, the main idea of the story continues to be an intriguing cultural exchange with a historical background that is very deep. Knowing these origins, it is easier to realize that the film's story is not just a Viking adventure, it is a civilized world meeting, which is characterized by misunderstanding, respect, and also cooperation. Antonio Banderas's own experience preparing for his role reflected these themes of cultural immersion and personal challenge. Banderas's battle on and off screen. Portraying Ahmad ibn Fadlan was a significant challenge for Antonio Banderas, who immersed himself in both the physical demands and the cultural complexities of the character. Banderas trained intensely in sword fighting and combat to portray a convincing warrior among Vikings, a role far removed from his previous performances. Yet, he consistently emphasized that embodying the character's diplomatic and empathetic qualities was just as important as mastering the fight scenes. He studied the historical figure of Ibn Fadlan and the Abbasid culture to understand the outsider perspective, the fear and fascination his character would realistically feel entering a violent and alien world. This research helped him develop a nuanced performance, showing Ahmed's transformation from a reluctant traveler to a critical part of the Viking group. Filming took place in harsh environments, including remote locations in Canada, where unpredictable weather intensified the production difficulties. Banderas recalls how the cold and physical exertion tested his endurance, but also contributed to the authenticity of the experience. The grueling schedule demanded both stamina and focus, making it a career-defining role. Despite these efforts, Banderas has spoken about frustrations with changes to the script and edits that diluted the more subtle aspects of his character. Key scenes that showed Ahmad's intellectual and cultural insights were shortened or removed, prioritizing action over character depth. This affected audience perception, reinforcing the idea of Ahmad solely as a warrior rather than a cultural emissary. Another challenge was embodying a Muslim character navigating Viking pagan society without falling into clichés or stereotypes. Banderas sought to humanize Ahmad by portraying his internal conflicts and gradual acceptance within the group. This approach required sensitivity and respect for both historical context and modern viewers' perspectives. Working alongside a diverse cast, including skilled actors playing Vikings of different backgrounds, Banderas often formed close bonds that helped him convey the importance of unity against a common threat. These off-screen relationships paralleled the film's themes of bridging divides. Moreover, Banderas has expressed how the physicality of the role changed his understanding of performance, emphasizing the body's role in storytelling alongside dialogue. He views Ahmad's journey as much about endurance and adaptation as about combat skills. The actor's reflections years later reveal a deeper appreciation for the character's complexity than he initially sensed during filming. He credits this evolving understanding as one reason he shared renewed insights with fans. This richer perspective on his role and the story connects naturally to the complicated and sometimes troubled production circumstances that shaped the film's final form. The journey behind the scenes is almost as dramatic as Ahmad's own, impacting how the story was ultimately told. What really happened during production would test the limits of everyone involved and redefine the movie's fate. Production struggles and changes. The making of The 13th Warrior was fraught with challenges that left a lasting impact on the film's final form. Director John McTiernan, fresh off hits like Die Hard and Predator, initially seemed like the perfect choice to helm this ambitious Viking epic. However, creative differences between McTiernan and the studio, alongside budget constraints, created tension that influenced the film's direction. Conflicting visions for the story's tone, whether to emphasize historical drama or action-packed spectacle, led to complications early on. One of the most significant issues involved the film's runtime. The studio pressured McTiernan to trim the movie down to meet commercial expectations. As a result, important scenes that fleshed out character relationships and cultural context were cut or shortened. These edits contributed to the confusion some viewers experienced regarding Ahmad's true role and the story's deeper themes. Fans and critics alike later noted the uneven pacing and gaps in narrative coherence. Reshoots further complicated the production. After principal photography wrapped, producers ordered additional scenes that shifted the tone more toward conventional action beats. Some of these reshoots aimed to clarify the plot or boost audience engagement, but they often conflicted with McTiernan's original vision. The blend of styles, history, and fantasy became less seamless, sometimes feeling at odds within the movie's flow. Behind the scenes, financial concerns played a major role. The movie's high budget, estimated at well over $60 million, put extreme pressure on the studio to make it commercially viable. Unfortunately, the marketing campaign struggled to communicate the film's unusual blend of genres, leading audiences to expect a straightforward Viking adventure, not a cultural and linguistic drama wrapped in myth. Casting was another area affected by the production's rocky path. Although the ensemble of actors was strong, including Banderas, Omar Sharif, and Dennis Storhy, some performances felt uneven due to script changes and limited character development. The editing process sometimes disrupted the continuity of character arcs, making the relationships less impactful. This made it harder for the audience to connect emotionally with the group dynamic. The visual effects, a major aspect that helped create the film's haunting creatures, also had difficulties. The Wendell, who were the movie's villains, made use of early computer-generated images, CGI, combined with practical effects to a great extent. Although this was an ambitious undertaking, the effects seemed poor by today's criteria, and at times drew the audience's attention away from the story rather than adding to it. These technological constraints contributed to the impression that the production difficulties were affecting the overall quality of the film. It is said that gradually McTiernan got more and more irritated, and finally, he withdrew from the promotional activities. His leaving was a sign of discord in the team behind the camera, which carried over into the post-production period. Making the final cut of the film became a compromise that was more influenced by the studio executives rather than the creative team. This fragmented process made it hard for the film to have a distinct identity when it was released. Among the hardships, the majority of the survivors from the production team and cast have reminisced about the experience with a smile, accentuating the zeal and commitment to the cause. The difficult conditions of the shooting and strict timing worked as a glue between them, which can be noticed in a few of the more vigorous scenes of the film. These moments were one of the factors that saved the story from the influence of the disturbances behind the scenes. On the other hand, the broken-up production let The 13th Warrior's theatrical release be overshadowed by poor reviews, which brings us to the question of how audiences and critics reacted to this coiled and flawed yet striving film at first. From box office flop to cult gem, when The 13th Warrior was released in 1999, it faced a lukewarm box office response and mixed critical reviews. Many viewers found the movie's pacing uneven and its story confusing, especially those expecting a traditional Viking action flick. Critics, too, pointed out the film's tonal shifts and narrative gaps, attributing some weaknesses to the troubled production. Despite strong performances and action sequences, it failed to capture wide enthusiasm upon release. Financially, the film did not recoup its substantial budget during its theatrical run, classifying it as a commercial disappointment. This underperformance was partly due to marketed expectations that highlighted battle scenes over the film's more complex cultural themes. The mismatch between promotion and content led to audience dissatisfaction and early drop-offs in theaters. However, the movie struggled to find its footing widely at the time. Over the years, a more appreciative audience emerged, drawn to the film's unique blend of Viking folklore, survival drama, and cross-cultural storytelling. Home video and later streaming platforms allowed fans to discover The 13th Warrior with fresh eyes, often appreciating subtle layers missed in the theatrical cut. The movie gained a growing reputation as a cult classic, cherished for its atmospheric setting and ambitious scope. Fans began discussing the film's overlooked strengths, such as its historical grounding and carefully choreographed fight scenes. They also admired Antonio Banderas's portrayal of Ahmed as a character who transcends the traditional warrior mold. This re-evaluation helped foster a community of enthusiasts who defended the film's creativity despite its flaws. Film scholars and Viking enthusiasts also contributed to the resurgence by highlighting the movie's relative accuracy in depicting aspects of Norse culture and Ibn Fadlan's accounts. Though not perfect, its attention to cultural detail set it apart from many other Viking-themed films and television shows. The role of nostalgia and the rise of Viking media in recent decades further fueled renewed attention. Shows like Vikings and games centered on Norse mythology prompted audiences to revisit the 13th Warrior as an early attempt to tell such stories on a grand scale. Fans appreciated it as a precursor that paved the way for more nuanced Viking portrayals. Moreover, the film's soundtrack and atmospheric cinematography have been praised in retrospect for enhancing the immersive experience. Many viewers have cited the haunting musical score and stark landscapes as integral to the movie's enduring appeal. These artistic choices elevated it beyond a conventional action film to something more poetic. Despite its cult status, some criticisms remain, especially regarding its editing and episodic narrative flow. Yet the conversation around the 13th Warrior today is far more positive than during its initial release. It stands as a film that was perhaps ahead of its time or misunderstood upon first viewing. In this light, Antonio Banderas's recent insights provide a compelling key to unlock further appreciation. His revelations help explain why the film resonated differently with deeper knowledge, enriching the community's understanding and shining new light on this misunderstood classic. This evolving legacy now invites us to reconsider some of the common misconceptions that have long clouded fans' views of the plot and characters, opening the door to fresh interpretations that honor the film's complexity. Unraveling the myths behind the story. Many viewers of the 13th Warrior have long held misconceptions that cloud their understanding of the story's depth and character motivations. One of the most common errors is the belief that Ahmad ibn Fadlan, played by Antonio Banderas, is simply a warrior thrust into a violent Viking world with little purpose beyond fighting. This view reduces the character to a generic action hero, rather than a nuanced cultural intermediary whose role is far more complex. Another widespread misunderstanding involves the nature of the Wendol, the film's mysterious antagonists. Some fans regard them merely as monstrous creatures to be vanquished, ignoring their symbolic role as an echo of historical barbarians and the theme of the other. The Wendol catalyze the warriors' unity, but also represent the fear of the unknown that underpins much of the story's tension. These layers are easy to miss in a film focused heavily on battle scenes. Viewers also often mistake the film's historical and mythological blending as an incoherent mix rather than an intentional narrative choice. The 13th Warrior navigates a delicate balance between legend and fact, and this can seem muddled without awareness of the source material's intent. The juxtaposition of Islamic, Viking, and early medieval European cultures was meant to highlight the collision and fusion of diverse worlds rather than confuse the audience. The role of language and communication is another frequently overlooked element. Ahmad's struggle to understand and be understood is not just a minor subplot. It reflects real historical dynamics between very different civilizations. Without appreciation for this, the film can feel disjointed and discourage viewers from engaging with the character's deeper challenges. Additionally, some viewers misinterpret the film's mood and pacing as slow or uneven due to a perceived lack of action. In truth, many sequences prioritize atmosphere, tension, and character development. These quieter moments serve a purpose in building suspense and exploring themes of isolation and cultural misunderstanding, but their subtlety was often lost on audiences expecting non-stop thrills. The bonds between the characters get Minna's and her film mates' views. Among others, the editing cuts of the movie are responsible for removing the pivotal scenes where the character development happens, and the bonding and mutual respect are through time. Evaluating these interactions with a narrow perspective reduces the film's idea about cooperation through differences to a minimum. One more wrong idea that is very much heard is that the movie ending does not solve the main issues and leaves the audience with a sense of being unfulfilled. However, the finale is intentionally vague to show the larger issues of existence and culture that come up throughout the movie. This encourages pondering over instead of a neat resolution, which is rare in action movies and perhaps has lost some followers. The representation of Ahmad's faith and his background has also led to misunderstanding. The movie not only shows the simple conflict of religions, but also tries to portray real curiosity and respect across the divide, which is a subtlety that may be missed by those who expect clear opposites or polarized conflicts. This subtlety adds to the character's journey, but it calls for careful observation to understand it. When these misunderstandings are cleared up, it becomes evident that the 13th Warrior holds rich intention, cultural depth, and historical insight, elements often overlooked when viewed merely as an action film. These revelations prepare us to better appreciate the recent insights that Antonio Banderas himself has shared about the film's meaning. Banderas's new insights. Antonio Banderas has recently provided fresh perspectives on the 13th Warrior that help illuminate the film's deeper intentions and clarify misunderstood elements. He emphasizes that his character, Ahmad, was meant to embody the role of the cultural mediator, not just the outsider warrior. This shifts the focus from pure physical combat to the power of understanding and translation between worlds. Banderas explains that many scenes cut from the theatrical release were designed to show Ahmad teaching the Vikings about his culture and religion, fostering mutual respect. These moments would have contextualized his influence beyond the battlefield and underscored the theme of empathy. Their absence contributed to the original confusion regarding his significance. He also stresses the importance of language as more than a practical barrier. Ahmad's efforts to communicate symbolize real historical encounters where civilizations grappled with unfamiliar customs and beliefs. This artistic choice elevates the character's journey from personal survival to cultural diplomacy. The actor recounts how filming in challenging environments helped him connect emotionally to Ahmad's feelings of alienation and adaptation. He came to understand the character's resilience as both mental and physical. This duality is central to the story's message about overcoming barriers. Banderas further reveals that the filmmakers intended to downplay conventional heroic tropes by portraying Ahmad as vulnerable and uncertain at times. This nuanced depiction was ahead of its time in action cinema, which often favors invincible protagonists. Such complexity was rarely embraced by mainstream audiences then, but adds depth today. He reflects on the film's approach to mythology, emphasizing that the blend of historical and mythical elements was designed to create a timeless, almost dreamlike atmosphere rather than to pursue strict historical realism. The depiction of the Wendel, though fantastical, serves a symbolic purpose. They embody humanity's primal fears of the unknown and the boundaries of cultural understanding. Not merely monsters, they indeed become mirrors reflecting the Norsemen's and Ahmad's fears and worries, and thus the film's theme of cultural conflict and coexistence is further developed. This use of imagery finally fortifies the film's communication of cultures, making it easier for the audience to see its divine storyline as an analogy to wider human experiences. Banderas does not shy away from mentioning the studio's interference. Instead, he goes on to say that the long process of cutting and reshooting left the narrative deprived of its smoothness and sometimes even interrupted the change of his character. However, he does not stop being with the film in its ambition and communicative power. He wants the revisit to these intentions to enable the viewers to acknowledge the original creative vision that was covered by the studio's modifications. His thoughts invite the audience to look at the film again, but this time in a more sophisticated way, and in Ahmad's case, not just as a warrior, but as a unifier among different cultures. The whole duality of the character is the film's predominant message of tolerance, curiosity, and survival in fear that continues to fascinate. In the end, the actor's views allow us to understand the reason for such an ardent following of the 13th Warrior, its combination of mind, feeling, and adventure, providing a filmic experience that should be appreciated and respected again more than ever. With a renewed understanding of these revelations, it becomes clear how the 13th Warrior's legacy has grown and why its place in Viking storytelling is more significant than many initially realized. Legacy and impact. Today, the 13th Warrior's legacy has grown significantly since its troubled release, evolving from a misunderstood box office disappointment into a film that inspires passionate discussion among fans and historians alike. Antonio Banderas's recent revelations have further deepened appreciation, highlighting the movie's ambition beyond typical action fare. Today, the film stands as a rare attempt to merge historical drama with myth and cultural diplomacy, enriching Viking storytelling in popular culture. Its blending of Islamic and Norse worlds invites a broader conversation about cross-cultural encounters in medieval times, a topic often neglected in mainstream media. The film's nuanced exploration of language, identity, and survival resonates with audiences interested in diverse perspectives rather than one-dimensional heroes. This has helped establish the 13th Warrior as more than just a cult classic. It has become a touchstone for nuanced historical narratives in cinema. The movie influenced how Viking stories began to be told in later media, encouraging a more textured portrayal of their culture. Shows like Vikings and other modern productions owe a debt to this film's attempt at authenticity and cultural complexity. Though imperfect, it opened doors to richer characterizations and avoided glamorizing violence as the sole Viking trait. Moreover, the atmospheric setting and score have inspired filmmakers and fans alike, contributing to a unique mood that sets the film apart. The stark Icelandic landscapes and haunting music grounded the story in a tangible world that feels immersive and authentic. This sensory experience continues to captivate viewers and adds to the movie's enduring allure. Banderas's reflections also revived interest by humanizing the story's protagonist as a bridge between disparate civilizations. His role challenges conventional action hero norms, emphasizing diplomacy, learning, and humility. This shift has influenced how actors and writers approach characters caught between cultures in historical and fantasy settings. The film's legacy is characterized by discussions about the difficulties of making complex source material suitable for the mainstream audience. The 13th Warrior risks editing decisions and studio interference that can easily obscure the director's intention. However, it also shows the power of storytelling and acting to overcome these difficulties and create an enduring impact. The film has been widely discussed in the academic world primarily because it represented Ibn Fadlan and his interaction with early medieval history. The historians consider it to be a major factor in generating public curiosity about the contacts between the Viking and Islamic worlds, the resulting educational debates being one aspect of this phenomenon that goes beyond mere entertainment. This cross-disciplinary effect adds to the film's overall cultural significance. The 13th Warrior remains an important case of ambitious filmmaking that defied genre conventions despite the criticism it still faces. Its legacy is proof of the power of the stories that select the way of complexity, of cultural exchange, and historical depth. Even when they have to confront the commercial challenges, the film and the audience are undertaking a mutual journey of discovery and rediscovery with the revelations of Antonio Banderas, which have deepened and made more appreciative the understanding of the meaning of the film. The 13th Warrior may have stumbled upon release, but Antonio Banderas's reflections reveal a film far deeper and more layered than most ever realized. Its legacy endures as a story of courage, connection, and cultural understanding woven through myth and history. If you enjoyed this exploration, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more cinematic journeys. And be sure to watch the next video appearing on your screen for another story worth rediscovering. Thanks for watching.